For people who aren't comfortable with that, this might not be the series for you. And if you don't like it, put the book down, close it, exit out. So for people who out there doing that, stop doing it, because it ain't cool. Hi y'all, I am back with another video, and I am reviewing a series that is for my readers that love black girl magic, for my readers that like black authors in fantasy, and for those that like young adult genre reads. In my last video, I went over series that I would like to finish before the end of 2023. And this past week, in between work and finals for classes and everything else, I was able to finish the Nightmareverse series by L.L. McKinney. This is a 3-part series that I was super eager to get a hold of. The last book took forever to come out. It kept getting pushed back and pushed back. And who can't help but want to read a series that has covers like these? I actually saw before the book came out, there were people actually leaving reviews and ratings, and I didn't even know people did this. And some of the ratings were bad, which is not cool at all. So for people who out there doing that, stop doing it, because it ain't cool. Anyway, let's get into the review. The Nightmareverse series is a retelling of a classic. It's a retelling on Alice in Wonderland. It is an action-packed urban fantasy with a black female teenager as the MC. Allison Kingston is the main character, and when the book starts, she's around 16 or 17, and she lives in the city of Atlanta. She's also called Alice, but she isn't the Alice that we think of from the original work. In the first book, A Blade So Black, we meet Alice right after her father passes away. She runs away from the hospital, super upset, and she comes across this creature that looks like a dog, but she learns that it's not a dog very quickly, and that is a creature called a nightmare. She's saved by a young looking man named Addison Hatta. Now, as you read the series, you'll see that L.L. McKinney, the author, her characters are inspired by the characters from the original work, Alice in Wonderland, but she definitely makes them her own. So much so that some of the characters actually have relationships with those of the same sex. For people who aren't comfortable with that, this might not be the series for you. So Addison Hatta saves Alice from the nightmare creature. In this series, nightmares are spawned from Wonderland, and they're the result of negative human emotions, thoughts, and they're nightmares. And Addison is a gatekeeper. As his job requires, he has to stop nightmares from leaving the Wonderland realm and coming to Earth, causing havoc and harm. But as a gatekeeper, he can't completely purge nightmares and needs a dream walker to help him do that. Hatta discovers by saving Alice that she has the affinity to be a dream walker. What's a dream walker? A dreamwalker is a human that can see nightmares, that can fight and purge nightmares, and they are able to cross over into Wonderland and back. Hada recruits Alice to be a dreamwalker and starts to train her. And from there, Alice has to juggle school, social life, her home obligations, trying to heal from the death of her father, and of course, fighting nightmare creatures. Now, I enjoyed Alice's character. She could definitely be one of my friends. She's fiercely loyal, quick with the comebacks, determined, and she's a lover of anime. Now, y'all know I like me some anime. Oh, and she curses a lot. Nothing vulgar, but for my readers that don't like cursing in any form, you might not like that she does this, but I don't mind it. So, in preparation for book 3 that just came out September, October, I reread the first 2 books because it's been a while since I've done that. And in rereading book 1, A Blade So Black, it reaffirmed for me that I enjoyed the first book. I felt like L.L. McKinney really set up the plot well. She set up the realm, the universe for this series. If I had to rate the book again, I would still give it like a 4 out of 5. In the first book, we learn about Wonderland and we learn more about Hada's history. In L.L. McKinney's Wonderland, we learn that it was ruled by the Queen of Hearts. And this Queen of Hearts had 3 daughters. During her rule, Hada served as her chief knight. I think he was even referred to as like the Silver Knight. And he was a part of her royal guard along with the Red Knight and the White Knight. Several years before the story begins, while serving the Queen of Hearts, the Queen had, again, 3 daughters, and her youngest daughter was named Odette. And she's described as a young girl with brown skin and pink hair. L.L. McKinney, makes these characters her own. She makes them diverse. So this young princess was well loved, and she often played with a young human girl named Alice. And I think that this is the Alice that we all know and love from the original work. But in this series, that Alice comes to Wonderland often to play with the young princess Odette. But one day, the young princess does not return. And neither does the human Alice. Hada quickly discovers that something is wrong, and the young princess is found dead. And the Queen of Hearts is so distraught that she plans to get revenge and blames humanity. And she starts a campaign to try to harm humanity. And she uses her royal tools called the heart and the eye to do so. She turns into what's called the Black Queen. Hada during this time still serves her because he blames himself for the death, for not protecting the young princess. And he continues to serve her until he sees the damage that's being done. He understands that getting rid of humanity would ultimately harm Wonderland itself. So he defects and helps her eldest 2 daughters, the White Queen and the Red Queen, stop her. Eventually they're able to stop the Queen of Hearts, aka the Black Queen, and they put her into a comatose state to stop her power. And they take her royal tools, the eye and the heart, pretty much her crown, and they split up this power. In the first book, the pace is really good. We learn about this history of Wonderland, the war that took place, and Hatta's role in it. And in the first book, the occurrence of nightmares are becoming more frequent. They're becoming more violent. And the nightmares are becoming more intelligent. There's also an appearance of a villain called the Black Knight. I really liked the details, the writing, and the action scenes, the battle scenes were really well written in my opinion. They kind of reminded me of, like, I was really able to visualize the scenes, and I could definitely see this series being a show. I could see it being an anime. I could see this series becoming a show and being on platforms like CW and Freeform. In the first book, the author does incorporate a real world issue. There's a death of a black teenager by a police officer, and again, this story does take place in the city of Atlanta, and she incorporates this incident in a scene where a nightmare is made stronger. And I bring this up to say because some of the reviews I read by some Caucasian readers, they mentioned that the author writing about the death of a black teenager by a police officer and her talking about, you know, having the characters talk about racial biases made them uncomfortable. And I just like to say that I don't think that she put those things in the book to make anybody comfortable. It's not comfortable, period. Again, this is a book by a black author, and the main character lives in one of the largest black populated cities in the country. And if she wants to incorporate real world issues in a book of fantasy, then she can do that. And if you don't like it, put the book down, close it, exit out. So overall, I feel like the first book, again, was really good for me. Now, rereading book 2, my opinion about the book changes. Book 2 changes in its smoothness, in its flow, okay? For lack of better words. The turn isn't necessarily a bad one, but the author starts to add a lot of plot twists. And she also tries to build and add that element of chemistry between Alice and Hatta and between some of the other characters. There starts to be a lot of layers added to the history of Wonderland, to the backgrounds of some of the characters. This book and the series starts to take a darker tone because the violence with the nightmares and the battles starts to increase. About halfway in, the plot starts to get a bit muddled, for lack of a better word, to get a bit confusing and long-winded in a way. And I found myself having to reread parts and scenes to make sure I understood what I was reading. But at the end of book 2, I had a concern about the writing and the plot. Book 3 is called A Crown So Cursed. And at the beginning of book 3, it starts off better. It starts off reminding me of book 1. You know, it started off really strong in the writing and what's going on. But then it quickly starts to feel like book 2. In book 3, Alice learns more about her family history and why she seems to have such a strong affinity and power to be a dream walker. We learn more about Hatta and his history with the other knights, the other gatekeepers. And we learn more about how the royal family, the Red Queen and the White Queen and the young princess that passed away, Odette, we learn more about their family history and how it's tying into the increase in these nightmares. Alice's friends actually get more involved in helping her, and as good friends do, they also help lie to her mother when she's calling, trying to figure out where she is. Mind you, Alice is probably off fighting nightmares. But I started to notice 50% into book 3, 70% in, even 90, because I made note of it, even 90% into book 3, that the plot wasn't wrapping up. Like, questions that were presented and things that were opening up in book 1 and book 2 weren't being wrapped up. They weren't being answered. If anything, more things were being presented to figure out. I could tell 90% into book 3 that the author was not going to be able to wrap up everything in a neat bow. For example, without giving too much away, okay, by the end of book 3, we don't understand why the young princess Odette was killed. We don't know who killed her. We don't know what killed her or why. I don't know if it was a nightmare or someone else. We never learn about the young Alice that came to play with the young princess. We never learn more about her, how she got into Wonderland, or what happened to her. It doesn't make sense how the Queen of Hearts, aka the Black Queen, was able to do what she did with the young princess's body. If you want to know more, you got to read the series so you know what I'm talking about, okay? The relationship that the Black Queen had with the ancient nightmare entity is not very clear. I didn't understand if she was controlling this entity to get her power, or if the entity was using her to act out its own plans. It also doesn't make sense why the Red Queen would leave one of the most powerful artifacts talked about in this series near the body of the comatose Black Queen, when the goal is to keep it from her, even in a comatose state, because she uses that as part of her power to carry out her revenge against humanity. And given that it took so long for this book, book 3, to come out, there were a lot of typos. Some of the characters were referred to as a he, and they were definitely a she. Okay, and like, no question about it, right? Like, this isn't, you know, someone who uses the pronoun they. There were a lot of typos of he, calling female characters he, and vice versa. And y'all know I am a sucker for romance, and I don't feel like McKinney did a good job with developing the romantic aspect, the romantic relationship between Alice and Hatta. It actually seemed like Hatta had more of a romantic interest in another character because of how much she had him think about the other character. I never really got that they really wanted to like be together or start a relationship or put a label on how they were feeling towards each other. It really left me hanging, and I'm upset. I actually read some of the reviews, and some people thought it was inappropriate that anything was budding between Alice and Hatta. Now, mind you, they didn't have sex or anything, so it's not that. But, you know, some people didn't like that any type of feelings were budding between them two because he was her mentor. He was her trainer, right? Now, I didn't have a problem with it because, again, nothing developed between the two really. But I will leave y'all to come to your own determination or outlook on that aspect of the series. She, the author, is giving herself some room to maybe come back and write another book for the series. If she chooses to do that, I definitely will read it because there's a lot of things that aren't wrapped up for me. Overall, I do appreciate L.L. McKinney's retelling of Alice in Wonderland. I loved that she created a series with characters that look like me, and they have all different types of color hair, and there's a range of people of different complexions and looks in this book, in this series. She crafted a very wonderful and detailed Wonderland, and it was action-packed, and there were a lot of relatable moments. I just think as long as I waited for book 3 to come out, I was a bit disappointed in how the series ended. I have no regrets though. It's definitely worth a read. And like I said, if she comes out with another book for this series, I would read it. I'm looking forward to more of her work. She actually is writing a story for an anthropology book that's coming out next year. It's called A Black Girl Survives This One, Horror Stories. And I definitely am down for horror stories. I am down for black people in horror and surviving, okay? Like, we gonna make it out of this one. So I already have it on my read list. I'll put a link for the book that she's writing the story for in the description box. So hopefully y'all can check that out too. Well, y'all, that is all I have for you for this video. Hopefully, you know, y'all will check out The Nightmare Verse by L.L. McKinney. Even though it left me hanging, it might not leave y'all hanging. Y'all might have a different outlook on the story and how it wraps up. I would really like to know what you guys think if any of you decide to pick it up. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to press that like button, leave me a comment, and hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when I come back with another video. Stay blessed, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.